Let's go.
You're listening to Making Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
Hey, podcast listeners, Al Martin here, back on Making Data Simple. Not wasting any time. I got Colin Levy here with me today, and he is a chief lawyer at Malbek. He's also a legal tech author. He's a commentator, a legal practitioner with diverse experience spanning publishing, education, technology, cybersecurity. You often don't get a lawyer that has the tech background. So look, this is the first one I've done of this form. I did have a patent attorney on not so long ago, so we're on the legal theme here. Technology spans like every profession at this point in time. But if I could give a couple more accolades to Colin, is that he's the Fastcase 50 list of legal innovators in 2022. His blog was also named the 90 most followed legal tech blogs of 2023. Colin, I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So look, I gave that little introduction, but if you wouldn't mind, would you please give us your personal intro and experiences and then bring us to today?
Sure. So I've been a lawyer for over 10 years at this point. I have always worked in-house. I didn't necessarily think it was going to work out that way, even though I had hoped that it would, primarily because when I graduated from law school back in 2010, it was a tough job market. There weren't a lot of jobs to be had, particularly in Boston, where I'm from and have grown up. But thankfully, I found a job after about a year of temporary roles. But I don't regret that year because it gave me exposure to a lot of different areas within legal, and it gave me exposure to some types of different technologies, which then sort of started to pique my interest about legal technology and legal tech, which is something I now am really focused on. And, I'd say over the last 8 or 9 years, I really have focused my efforts on trying to help bridge the gap between the legal industry and technology, partly because I've seen technology impact other industries and thought surely legal could benefit from the use of tech as well. And I recently came out with a book, The Legal Tech Ecosystem, which intends to help kind of provide a thematic high-level overview to the world of legal tech in an effort to help further bridge that gap between law and tech. And I actually started that book back in 2020 at the early stage of the pandemic when there really wasn't a whole lot to do other than just sit it out and hope that things improved. And so since then and since writing the book, I've really been even more active about speaking and writing about technology and trying to help make it more accessible for fellow lawyers and legal professionals.
Fantastic. And for those listeners, it's the legal tech ecosystem, innovation, advancement, and the future of law practice. So he's got a book that he's promoting for good reason. Let's jump right in there. What is legal tech? What's the definition?
That is a great question and one I am frequently asked. And you will get probably a variety of different answers from different people. My answer is the following, which is that I see it as different solutions that are aimed at helping better align the delivery of legal services with those most in need of such legal services. And the ecosystem, as I refer to in the book, is really intended to emphasize the point that it's not just about the technology itself, but it's about the technology working in conjunction with businesses and people together in a collaborative way to help advance the legal industry. And so really, businesses, people, and technology are all growing ever more interdependent upon one another. And I think we've been seeing that play out in a variety of industries. And now we're starting to see it play out within the legal industry.
Do you only litigate legal technology scenarios, situations? I mean, tell me about what's your day job? How does it play into this?
My day job is an interesting one. I am the one and only lawyer for a legal tech startup focused on contract management. So my company creates a solution that helps legal departments manage their contracts. And that means managing the documents, managing the creation of documents, the negotiation of those contracts, and the tracking of those contracts. That's not the only part of my role. Another part of my role is writing and speaking about contract management best practices, about our solution, and about technology as it applies to the practice of law. So really kind of the stuff I do in terms of my writing and speaking outside of my day job feeds into my day job as well. So it's sort of a mutually beneficial relationship there. And really, the way I see it is technology is here to be another set of tools to help you. And that's really the way I frame what Malbek does. And that's really the way I frame what legal tech overall does in general.
So you don't litigate any, I mean, it's not directed towards technology. You're just a technology advocate in the legal profession. Is that correct? Or did I?
So that is in part correct. I'm not a computer scientist by background or some kind of coder or anything. I actually slowly but surely got into technology and learning a little bit of programming now, but I'm not a native sort of tech person per se. I've just grown to really love it over time as part of my exploration of the law and of technology and the relationship between the two.
But is that, this will sound like a weird question. Is that true in the sense that I have done some research and I was listening to you? You can code in Python or something right now, can't you?
I can code in Python, not particularly well, but I can code in Python. And the reason for that really is, so a lot of technology, including artificial intelligence, is data driven and is increasingly using data to drive decision making. And that's how technology is influencing the future of law as well, as it's making the practice of law be more data driven. And so that drew me to coding in part because programming and coding in some ways helps you structure information and learn how to think about things in a logical, structured way, sort of in the way that some of these algorithms approach data in terms of organizing it and approaching it. And so that's in part what drew me to want to learn Python, was helping me to learn how to structure not just my thoughts, but also data in general in a way that's more effective, and help me then explain that sort of approach to others who may not intuitively think that way.
So are you a techie in a legal body, or a lawyer that's just wants to dabble in tech? Which one is it?
So I would say I am, had you asked me that question, 5 years ago, I probably would have said that I'm a lawyer with a little bit of a techie kind of dabbling in tech. And I'd say now I'm more a techie who also happens to be a lawyer. So I would say that's kind of where I'm moving towards. And that's just over time of just being more and more embedded within technology and learning more and getting excited about all the tools that continually get created and pushed out there.
But it sounds like it's more about tools that the legal industry could and should be using and not afraid of. But tell me if that's true. But you might even be selling yourself short on the tech side, because look, folks, if you go out there and you search Colin Levy, you're going to see a bunch of articles and blogs on tech and stuff. It's pretty impressive. I mean, look, it almost seems, to the point that you are a techie that is in a legal body.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably fair. I would say that writing for me has always been something that I've just enjoyed doing, and has always been almost therapeutic, actually. So for me, writing has been a great way for me to not just share my thoughts, but help me organize my thoughts and share some of what I've learned from conversations with others. So yes, I have written a fair amount and published a fair amount. I've been lucky to be able to have done so and be given the opportunity to do so. And really that grew out of an effort to try to just help others learn about these tools and about technology, because I once feared technology myself and I overcame it. So I really am trying to help others overcome their fear through making it personable and through making it less intimidating and less sort of about sort of the coding, if you will, but more about the utility of using these tools and how they can help you be better at your job and also better able to help others.
I want to talk about the tools you're referring to, but before I do, why do you call legal tech an ecosystem?
Sure. So it's the way I view it in terms of the term ecosystem is that you've got these technologies that are great and powerful, but the real benefit of these technologies comes from their actual use by individual users. And so, users benefit from using technology, and technology benefits from the feedback and from the use cases that get developed from those who use these technologies. So it's a sort of a beneficial relationship there. But putting on top of that, these users operate within the context of usually a business that has processes and has ways of doing things. And so really all of these different elements interact with one another and influence one another. And that's really how why I came up with the term ecosystem, because that's how I sort of see it. It's kind of like a rainforest in that you got the trees, you got the animals, you got the weather, they all impact one another and are dependent upon one another. And that's similar to how technology is with people, processes, and businesses, is they're all in some ways dependent on one another and also influencing the development of one another.
Where has law been traditionally, and where do you think it's going? I guess where I'm going with this question is, what tools do you see that should be used from a tech perspective in the legal profession? Where are they at today? Where do you think they're going to be in the future? I mean, there's a reason you're talking about legal tech all the time. Where has law been and where's it going?
Sure. Historically, the legal field has been one that has been heavily tied and dedicated to tradition and sort of the way things have always been done and the way things have been taught have mainly revolved around there's just one way to do these things and that's how you do it and so on. And, law school for me struck me as kind of 3 years of legal history, which was interesting, but not exactly directly applicable to me being a practicing attorney. So that was a little bit of a sort of discovery after I graduated from law school. So that's where it's been. In terms of where it is now, I'd say that, had you asked me this question 10 years ago, I would probably have given you a different answer. But now the legal industry is becoming ever more data-driven, tech-driven, and that stems out of an effort, I think, to in part better align its delivery of legal services to those who are in need of legal services in terms of clients, whether they're individuals or businesses, who are increasingly data-driven and tech-savvy and expecting those they work with, including lawyers, to also be that way. And we're also seeing the use of tools to help drive better legal decision-making and better overall delivery of legal services. For example, we have tools that can help you produce legal documentation, either the automation of creation of documents or the review of documents, the organization of documents. We also have tools that can help provide you with data-driven analysis of existing case law and research and give you a sense of, all right, well, is this case worth litigating? If so, what are some arguments that are worthwhile pursuing based off of prior case law, and not just prior case law, but also how specific judges have decided certain cases based on certain lines of argument, and what arguments tend to get pushed back upon based off of their writings and their decisions. So there's a lot of different tools that are out there to help lawyers become ever more data-driven and more analytical, which I think is in turn what clients are looking for. And so, that I think explains the rise of legal tech in part. And also, I think the other part of it is, for a long time, there's been this great divide between those who need legal help and those who provide it. And it can be very, very expensive in the US and complicated as well to understand exactly how to find the right resources and how to go about getting legal help. And now, thanks to technology, you can find the right documents quickly. You can complete them quickly. You don't have to seek out a lawyer. It can be expensive and often out of reach for many. So, there are a lot of different benefits, I think, that stem from technology that lawyers and the legal industry as a whole are starting to take advantage of.
I got the legal document automation and AI that, it's one of the tools. Give me some other tools that you'd be referring to.
Sure. So, on the litigation analytic front, so you've got tools that can assist with that, such as Unicourt, which provides analytics around data. You got legal research tools like LexisNexis, Westlaw, Fastcase that provide not just research, but also data analytics and can help you not just research cases, but also put together briefs and actually put together potential arguments and ensure that your cases are cited appropriately. You have other tools that can help you kind of format briefs, such as ClearBrief. You have tools that can help you format and ensure that everything kind of is lined up in terms of references and things. DocStyle is one of those tools. So there's really quite a number of them out there that exist to help. There are also plenty of tools that allow you to create your own sort of workflows and your own tools yourself, such as Brighter and Joseph, that allow you to essentially create your own automation tools without having to code at all, which are really quite amazing and I think quite helpful for those who may be a little bit frightened or intimidated by some of these more advanced technologies and don't want to have to code, but want to experiment with creating tools of their own to fit their specific needs and or ways of working.
And I hope the listeners get it. I mean, by example, I work at IBM, and we've got a product, by example, that's called IBM Stored IQ for Legal. And what it does is it provides discovery management for like hold notification to identification, preservation, collection. So I think that is transforming the industry. But how far along are we? Do all firms use this type of technology now? Or you say, hey, so you would be surprised. Some still are doing the manual methods.
So that's a really good question. I think it's still very much a mixed bag, although I think that the tide is finally turning in that law firms and legal departments now are making better use of a range of different technologies. I think that's in part driven by the rise of generative artificial intelligence and how accessible it now is. But overall, I think that there are still some who are perhaps a little more skeptical or slow to adapt, whereas others are going full throttle and kind of using any and all tools that are available. So I think there's sort of a wide range of different approaches. But overall, the direction is towards the use of more and more of these technologies. And we've also seen law firms, including some big law firms, that have not just adopted technologies, but have gone about and creating their own subsidiaries that are devoted to incubating particular tech startups and or developing solutions in conjunction with clients that are tech-based to help their clients, particularly business clients, achieve their goals. Norman Rose Fulbright, for example, has X Studio, which is aimed at that. And there are plenty of others as well, which I think is a way for these law firms to show not just their tech savvy, but also their work interested in working collaboratively with their business clients and not just providing solutions, but actually actively developing solutions with them that are attuned to their specific needs, which I think can be not just beneficial for the clients, but also lucrative for the law firms, which, let's be honest, is what in part drives a lot of law firm decision making, is how can we continue to be financially successful. And ordinarily that has historically come from just sort of the billing by the hour and being very proactive about that. But now they're seeing that with technology, they have to come up with other ways of doing so as technology continues to put pressure, I think, financially on a lot of law firms to find other ways of billing, and clients as well are putting pressure on law firms to find other ways of billing that aren't relied upon, that aren't, dependent upon time-based billing.
I presume, like, if we're being honest, that, yeah, some law firms are probably scared of some of the technology, to your point, because some of that electronic discovery and what we just described, that was all billable hours that now, at best, it's been I don't want to say it's completely alleviated. You still got to do it, but it can be automated. So I think you're reducing your overall cost to the customer, which is good for the client. But does that make the firms a bit shy on how they want to orchestrate that tooling?
So I don't think it necessarily makes them shy per se. I think that they're now just being forced to confront the question of, what do we do in terms of our headcount? What do we do in terms of assigning work, and who does what type of work and why, and how much should this work be done by technology? How much should it be done by individuals? I also think that they're thinking about, well, we can still bill by the hour, but at the same time, we can engage in some of this more project kind of management and project-based work, which can help supplement perhaps any perceived loss in the billable hour rates that these law firms have achieved. But overall, I would say financially, law firms, even during the pandemic, didn't seem to be hurting all that much. But I certainly think that the rise of generative AI is going to, as generative AI continues to increase in its power and ability, I think it's going to continue to put pressure on these firms to perhaps move away from the billable hour. But that being said, we've seen the billable hour being incredibly resilient as a financial model, and I don't see that necessarily changing overnight. I simply see these firms diversifying in terms of the types of work and the ways in which they work with clients.
You mentioned AI, the integration of AI on the legal sector. Can you say more on that? I mean, where are we at today, and where do you think we'll be going?
Yeah, so I think, where we are right now with artificial intelligence is, I think we're in a very exciting time in that we have achieved the way to access artificial intelligence easily and quickly, because now, instead of having to kind of be some sort of really tech savvy coder or what have you, you can simply just ask some of these tools a question and will provide you with an answer in a human like fashion, when in reality what it's doing is it's looking at its data and providing an output based off of a specific input that it's looking at. But because of that increased accessibility, I think now we've seen humans overall get really excited, because now they think, oh, well, this is really cool. We're able to do more with these tools, and they can really help me do more without having to be some sort of tech person, and or helping me do more, be more productive, show more value, have to do less of this sort of administrative stuff that used to be very time consuming. And now AI can do it fairly quickly. So that's exciting. But I also think it's important to remember that we're really kind of I think, at the tip of the iceberg with respect to AI, because we've seen AI continue to develop very, very quickly. And I think we're going to continue to see that in terms of its ability to do things more autonomously, do things in a more automated way, require less sort of prompting, which is basically giving it instructions as to what to do. So I think that increased interactivity and power will continue to influence how we approach AI and how businesses incorporate AI. At the same time, I think that we have also seen examples of its current limitations in terms of AI, not intentionally, because I don't think there's any intent with AI currently, but has the ability to kind of just make up information and propose it as being the truth when it's not. And so I think that raises some questions around being careful about what we ask these solutions to do, and what types of information we train these solutions on, and or provide these solutions with to provide us with outputs. So I think there are a lot of different considerations at play here, and they'll grow ever more complex as AI solutions grow ever more complex. But at the same time, I don't think, regardless of the flaws or limitations of these tools, that's not going to stop these technologies from continuing to evolve, or from technology from continuing to advance, because nothing stops the march of technology other than our ability to come up with new ways of creating these technologies and new ways of applying them to different use cases.
What use case or AI use case do you see most prevalent?
So I think right now I'm seeing a lot of use cases that involve summarization of documents, or the review of documents, or perhaps the review and then providing suggestions for how to improve a document, or provide a way to respond to someone who perhaps has pushed back on a certain contractual clause, or someone wants to seek a new way of drafting a clause that addresses a certain concern that's been raised. So a lot of what I'm seeing right now with AI and law is essentially just data is sort of applied analysis and applied review. And that, I think, is something that AI right now is really, really good at, and historically has been good at, because of its based on data and its need for data. So I think that will continue to be the case. I think that in terms of creativity, though, we're going to continue to see, I think, other use cases that involve the creation of new types of information, and the interplay between review and analysis information and providing conclusions and actionable bits of information that come from AI. So we're not, I think, quite there yet in law, but we'll get there pretty soon. And we've certainly seen that, I think, already in play with respect to other businesses and how they're using AI to drive automated decision-making regards different types of things.
I'm going to take AI in a different direction in just a moment. But before I do, are there any myths around AI or just legal technology in general?
There are a lot of myths that I could get into. I think that with respect to legal tech in general, and then I'll get into AI more specifically. Legal tech in general, I think people sometimes think that somehow a technology solution is the only solution, or the best solution, or the solution that can solve all a business's problems. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think there are often a lot of different solutions that may be more appropriate, but that comes down to taking the time to figure out exactly what problem it is you're trying to solve before you address it or look for a solution. I think sometimes people, even lawyers, are prone to what I call shiny key syndrome, and that they see some shiny piece of tech and think, oh, well, my friend's using that. That seems to work well for them, so I might as well use it too, because it probably will work really well for them. Well, that may or may not be true. It depends on the context in which it's being used and their particular use case, which may or may not reflect your own individual use case, which is why I say it's really important to first understand exactly what problem it is you're trying to solve for, and then consider kind of what an ideal solution will look like as you're trying to solve that problem. So once you have answers to both of those questions, I think then you can go about evaluating solutions. And look, technology may be one type of solution you want to evaluate, but you may want to evaluate other ones as well, because your solution may be one of people, maybe one of culture, maybe one of process. And those types of problems may or may not necessarily be solved by technology. I've seen a few cases where technology comes into play, and often it just makes an existing problem worse because you didn't do your research before in terms of thinking about what your problem was and how to solve it. I think another myth with respect to technology, and particularly in law, is oftentimes you search for and evaluate a technology and then put it in place, but you don't take your users into account, meaning you don't bring your users along for the evaluation process. And then all of a sudden you suggest to them that they use this tool you just invested in. And they are resistant to that because they had no say in the process. They had no part in the evaluation. And so what you end up with is shelfware, basically, an expensive piece of software that sits on some proverbial shelf somewhere and then isn't used. And that's a real big problem. And not only is it a problem because you just spent all this time and money evaluating and then purchasing this product, but also now it turns you off and probably reduces support for investigating other technologies because you haven't because it wasn't the first one you did and invested in and bought wasn't adopted. So that, I think, is another challenge. Moving over to AI for a minute, I think that people, when it comes to AI, think that at the same time it's capable of everything and capable of nothing at the same time. In other words, I think people sometimes think that AI can do everything and do it well, or do nothing and can do nothing well. And really, I think the answer is a little more complex, where it can do certain things well and some things not so well. And I've already mentioned some of the things that I think it can do well, primarily with respect to data analysis and summarization of data, and organization of data. So, I think that those use cases for AI will continue to improve. AI will continue to improve, but it comes down to really what types of data sets you're using to train the AI on, and how much of that data you're using. Because, for example, in law, I've read some articles and seen some people complain about some of these AI solutions that aren't very good at legal tasks. And my answer is, well, of course they're not very good at those legal tasks because they haven't been trained on trained on legal data. So they're only going by what they've been trained on, which may or may not be pertinent to what you're trying to achieve, which is why it's really important to look at and understand what data has been used to train these models, and also what type of AI you're using. In legal tech, we've seen contract management solutions like my own company, as well as other companies that are more on legal research or legal analytics, incorporate AI. And those are likely more effective for legal work because they've been trained on data that's more pertinent to the legal field. And so I think that's something that's important to keep in mind as well. And overall, I think that context matters when it comes to technology, whether it's used in law or elsewhere. So I think it comes down to doing your research and really just understanding exactly what it is you're seeking and why before you start searching, because otherwise it can be very easy to be overwhelmed, intimidated, or dissuaded from pursuing the evaluation because you're just not finding what you are seeking.
This is where I want to pivot to AI in terms of, I think there is a lot of value. You can go through trillions of documents in record time, get you the information you need, past precedent. But speaking of, and I know you've heard of this, is that there was a recent case where a lawyer sued a Colombian airline and cited briefs in case law that didn't exist. And he did his research, let's just say with ChatGPT, I'll call it like it is. So he's called in front of the bar for investigation. He had to explain what happened. And in his affidavit, he said, look, ChatGPT had convinced him that it was telling the truth. He had specifically asked the model whether the cases, I think it was 6 cases, were either bogus or real. And the chatbot responded, hey, it was real, and said it was referenced in legal databases such as LexisNexis and Westlaw, which was hallucination. I don't know where the case is now, but surely you've heard of that. Thoughts? And is this going to be things that we see in the future as we go forward?
So I have a lot of thoughts, I think. And one of my first thoughts on it is that we'll probably see more of these erroneous situations where people use an AI solution and inherently trust that solution, which I think is a problem. I don't think you should inherently trust these solutions. You should trust but verify. So that's first, meaning, check its work, double check what it's
Sorry to
citing.
interrupt, but how does that happen anyway? You're a lawyer. How would he not verify that? I mean,
Well,
that doesn't make any sense to me.
that's an excellent question. And I think the answer is, quite frankly, that this lawyer was incompetent. Uh, I
Okay,
don't
fair
think
enough.
that I don't think that it's not the technology's fault. The technology did what it was trained and asked to do, and it did it. The problem is this lawyer simply didn't check their work and check the AI's work, which really is less of a tech problem, more of just the lawyer being
Fair.
a competent attorney and checking its work. I mean, you're trained to do this and over and over again when you're in middle school and high school. And especially when you become a lawyer, it becomes increasingly important. So I think that case really is less kind of about technology acting in a way that's negative or inherently bad. It's more about a lawyer that just simply didn't do their job, and that resulted in, I believe, the lawyer got sanctioned and what have you for citing cases that didn't exist. And
The
so
good thing
that's
that the
why.
judge was on his game. And I mean, I don't know how that works. I'm not in the legal profession. My daughter's in her last year of law school, so she'll tell me someday. She probably could tell me exactly what would happen here. But does the judge always cross-reference that? They shouldn't have to for the lawyer, but obviously something set him off, and he was like, "Wait,
Right.
something doesn't
Well, I
seem right."
think that judges normally don't necessarily kind of go through every case that's cited, but clearly in this case, the judge, who presumably is well versed in the issues that were before him in this case, knew kind of a lot of the relevant cases and was like, I haven't heard of that case. That's odd. Looked it up, realized it was made up, and then thought to himself, I wonder about these other cases because I haven't heard some of these other ones either. So, I think that's really what happened was that the judge, who was well versed in the issues and knew kind of all the relevant cases, or at least a lot of them, was like, I hadn't heard of these. And in effort, I don't think necessarily kind of question the judgment of the lawyer, but more out of a question to kind of educate himself about the issues and about these cases, was just doing his due diligence and realized, look, these cases aren't real. That's a problem. This lawyer, clearly was not competent and do their job. So that's, I think, what happened there. And look, hallucinations with AI they continue to happen, which is why it's increasingly important to be specific and detailed with respect to what you ask it to do and double check its work. Now, I don't think are you going to always have to do all those things when it comes to AI? Not necessarily, but again, we're in the early stages here, which is why I think this is so important, and also why I think it's important upon all of us to treat these tools as kind of childlike in a way, and that they know some things and they pretend to know a lot more than they do, but they may not. And so it's important to really do your due diligence. And look, I don't think this is not an argument for or against AI. It's more simply a statement of, use AI, but be aware of what you're doing and of its limitations.
You think that somebody of that nature would lose their ability to practice because there's outcomes that would have been cited as past precedent, right? And then somebody's outcome is determined by false precedent. I mean, look, that I don't know how we allow that,
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. Certainly, I think we've seen a fair degree of skepticism and also further awareness of the use of AI in briefs and in cases, and I think further transparency probably is going to be needed as well. And I've seen some judges and courts also kind of set out
100%.
requirements with respect to the use of AI. And that, I think, points to the larger issue of there being no real kind of ethical framework around the use of AI by anyone for whatever purpose. But regardless of that, there, in at least 40 plus states, there is this rule of tech competence for lawyers, meaning that lawyers have an ethical duty to be aware of the relevant risks and benefits of relevant technology that could be applicable to their practice. And in this case, this lawyer didn't fulfill that requirement because they didn't understand fully the limitations of this AI tool they were using in their practice, and as a result, that's they got sanctioned. So I think that is an indication of further awareness and education being necessary. In terms of a lawyer losing their license at practice, I mean, if it were since this was a civil case and not a criminal case, I think the stakes were a little bit different. If it was a criminal case, then at the very least, there would be the potential perhaps for, the case to be reheard or for the trial to be, for there to be a mistrial, what have you. And I think that still is a potential risk here with lawyers using AI, not double checking their work.
Hey, but I'm so glad you said transparency, because a lot of times, look, I'm at IBM. We have tons of foundational models that we're pushing out right now. And a lot of clients that I meet with are talking about differentiation. And I'm not sure there's a full respect for some of the differentiation I cite, but you've outlined it. In other words, some of our differentiation is we publish the data training sets, the pipeline transparency for those models, so you know exactly where they're coming from. We have IP infringement protection. That's without a cap for our models. So it says, hey, we're going to stand by them. We know what's in them. We know that they're void of bias, void of hate speech, different things like that. And we allow you to get data across hybrid cloud, et cetera. That transparency is so important. But I kind of look at AI, and given where we're at today, I kind of see, just very simply, good actors, bad actors. And the line of distinction is pretty difficult right now, meaning you could be a good actor just by being an upstander, in other words, versus a bystander. What I mean by that is, look, there's loads of legislation, you probably know, on the way. European Union is ahead of the world because they got loads everywhere. The US has detailed the AI Bill of Rights. There's like 150 bills with AI right now. So we're early on. The thing I'm concerned about, and I want your view on, is it's kind of the Wild West. And that's what tends to happen with tech, particularly startup, new tech. You end up asking for forgiveness later, meaning, and I'm picking on Google here because I can, and I've cited this before in this podcast. They've got like a model that it's a popular data set called C4. It's used by one of their foundational models called T5. Just bear with me here. But it's got the copyright symbol in that model over 200 million times. 200 million times. They're just taking copyrighted material. Where do you think we're going to land with all this? I mean, we got several authors, like, for example, you just wrote the book, right? If your book was sucked into a model, essentially where anybody could get it, get feedback from it, know your characters, everything else like that. I was reading a book the other day, or listened to a podcast where somebody, they were checking out a foundational model, and they found out that, their book was in that model because there's nobody that could understand the characters to that degree, right? He was searching on his characters. Where do you think this is going to all end from a legal perspective?
So that's a really interesting question. Well, first of all, I want to commend IBM for being so open and transparent with respect to, I think, their policies and use of data. And that's why I mentioned transparency earlier. With respect to your question about kind of where are we going with all of this, I think, as you mentioned, the EU tends to be pretty proactive about AI, and certainly I think that has been evidenced by the AI Act that they have. I think in the US we tend to be a little more reactive, and I think that's evidenced by Biden's executive order, which is kind of very sort of heavy on sort of aspirational themes and not very heavy on regulation, and that's partly because with an executive order it's hard to really provide a lot of detail. But I think we've seen some key themes in that executive order that point to kind of where, at least in the US, things likely are going to go. Mainly, we're going to start being more attuned to kind of evaluating the risks involved with various tools, being encouraging / demanding / requiring more transparency in terms of what data is collected, how it's used. I think that, the copyright question is an interesting one. Certainly, I think a lot of authors, as we've seen, some prominent ones have been very proactive about responding to sort of these models incorporating their copyrighted works. And that will be something that will definitely be needing to be clarified, I think, in the courts, frankly, in terms of the extent to which copyright goes, whether it protects against the use of works in models. My personal view is I think that these models shouldn't necessarily be using copyrighted works unless you're past the period of copyright protection, but we'll see how things evolve. But again, this all points to us being really in kind of the Wild Wild West period with respect to AI. Unlike in the EU, we haven't sort of gotten our act together per se in terms of proposing a regulatory regime. And it's likely going to be a state-based one unless the federal government can get their act together and propose something, which is fairly unlikely given the current dynamics. But to your point about kind of the need for transparency and the need for protecting user data, absolutely, there's a huge need for that. And I think that hopefully there'll be a continued emphasis on that going forward. And I think that, AI, as it continues to grow in its power and its influence, I think there's going to be a need for not just state, local, and the federal government to be more aware, but also for individual users to be more aware, and for these companies that are developing these solutions to provide users with more control over their data and more transparency in terms of how any data they provide to these models, whether through a prompt or otherwise, is used and stored and shared. Kind of like the way that companies currently are required to deal with personal data and other types of identifying data under regimes like GDPR.
Yeah, look, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. In that, it could be like Napster, where when they started, they took everybody's music and they don't exist today. Or it could be like Google, where at one point they were actually working with universities to literally scan books from their libraries to make them referenceable. And while they had approval by the university, they didn't have approval for the authors. They settled that. They funded the authors, I think, separately, ultimately over time. But it worked out well and in their favor. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how it all works out. Let me ask a few questions on your book. So you just finished this book, The Legal Tech Ecosystem: Innovation, Advancement, and the Future of Law Practice. Any comments on, the listeners out there who should want to go pick up this book? Everybody? Specific disciplines? Thoughts?
Sure. So the book is intended to be a very accessible, easy read, meaning that you don't need a technical background, and meaning that it's really intended for those who are eager to learn more about the evolving relationship between technology and the legal industry. So it's aimed at legal professionals, whether you be lawyers, whether you're in legal operations, whether you're paralegals, contract admins, or law students. So it's kind of aimed at anyone who has a role to play within the legal industry, who wants to learn how to kind of adapt to this new tech-enabled world and be on top of their game with respect to using technology. And one of the approaches I took with the book to sort of help do that was I quote from folks that I have personally interviewed and spoken with and published those interviews on my blog. And I do that in an effort to help show people how others have sort of blazed their trails, how others have found their way, how others have created products that have helped lawyers or clients. And that is really intended about trying to sort of put a more practical spin on legal tech and not just talk about it as sort of this theoretical world, but as this real world of practical application solutions and real people doing real things that have been impactful for others. And that's really the intent with the book, is to help kind of turn sort of what seems like a theoretical world into a realistic one, and one that's accessible and non-intimidating. And I really hope that the book aims to do that and helps people find their way in legal tech as I found my own way.
Terrific. Appreciate that. Is there anything that we failed to mention, whether it's related to the book or related to legal tech, that you want to make sure you mention before we exit?
Sure. I would just mention, well, first of all, the book's available on Amazon in Kindle, hardcover and soft cover. So please check it out. In terms of finding me, I'm available on LinkedIn under my name, on Twitter /X/ whatever you want to call it, @CLevy_law. That's CLEVY_law. And you can also go to my website, colinslevy.com, COLINSLEVY.com. Please do reach out if I can help you. And I'm always eager to talk with people, give talks, write things. So please get in touch if I can be of help in terms of you finding your way or helping your colleagues find their way within legal tech.
Thank you for that. Hey, just a couple more questions before we wrap up. And one is, look, I told you my daughter's last year of law school. Any advice for a student that's getting ready to practice law?
Sure. I think number one, this has nothing to do with technology actually, but has everything to do with kind of finding your way and being successful, is focus on building relationships with others. Not just kind of typical networking, like asking people to help you find a job, but building relationships with others in terms of learning what they've done, maintaining sort of touch with them and learning from them, because that's how I've been able to find new opportunities, find doors I didn't know exist, find roles, learn things that I didn't realize I needed to learn. So that's number one. Number two is, regardless of what you want to do when you graduate from law school, understand that the world is a very dynamic place. So just because you may think that this is what you want to end up doing in terms of being a litigator, being a corporate lawyer, doing something else, be open and be flexible, because you never know. If you have a slight interest in something, don't be afraid of pursuing it, even if it has nothing to do with what you're currently doing in your role. So that's number two. And then number three, I would say is, look, the legal industry is evolving, dynamic, and diverse, and it's not just made up of lawyers. So don't feel like just because you went to law school, you have to be some traditional lawyer having a traditional lawyer job. There are plenty of other types of roles that are available. So I would say open yourself up to exploring and really kind of just pursuing what seems to be passion, what seems to make you happy. And you never know where that may lead. So I think it's best to kind of be open to pursuing those passions and seeing where they lead you to.
Great. Any mistakes to watch out for?
I think probably the number one mistake would be not focusing on kind of building your personal brand, meaning, using LinkedIn, I think, has been especially powerful for me. And I think it could be especially powerful for law students in terms of helping others figure out who they are, what they're looking for, sort of how they want to define themselves, because people do use LinkedIn quite a bit and do look at others' profiles. And the more you can kind of tell your story, the more others may reach out to you or may be able to help you as well. So you kind of, want to be able to build your brand to be able to help others help you.
Nice. All right. Last question. What do you do for fun?
Fun. I like to ski, not particularly well. I like to hike. I like to play a fair number of video games as well. And in general, also tend to the cats and make them happy.
Tend to cats? Is that what you said?
Yeah, we have two cats, and part of the way I enjoy myself is playing with them and making sure that they're content and happy.
Sounds good. My daughter is going to be thrilled. Not only are you a lawyer, but she's got like 3 cats. She's become a cat lady. So you guys have that in common.
They
Fantastic.
are a lot of work.
Well, she tells me that. I keep telling her, hey, you need to come over. Well, I got to tend to the cats. I'm like, what the hell? They're cats. They're supposed to take care of themselves. Come over and see me. She's like, no, it doesn't work that way, Dad. So,
yeah, no, it definitely doesn't.
All right. Well, thank you being here. Colin Levy, everybody. I appreciate it. Been a good discussion.
Thanks for having me.
Terrific. As always, folks, hit us on almartintalksdata@gmail.com. Until next time, we'll see you on the podcast. Later.